You surrender again and again every day in your life to all kinds of things, all kinds of worldly requirements, all kinds of conditions, all kinds of demands, all kinds of obligations. But when it comes to spiritual surrender, when it comes to surrendering to that which is the highest itself, the supreme itself, somehow we all say, well, I'm confused. How do you do that? So if one is on the spiritual path as a student, not as a disciple or a devotee, as a student primarily or only, that's the problem, is you get to the point where the limitation can't be overcome because students don't surrender, students learn. And the learning is useful, the learning is practical, the learning uplifts you, the learning is required. You can't skip the required learning, but you also can't expect to reach the highest through a learning process. You don't learn the path. You walk the path, you live the path. Much has to be learned, but the path isn't a learning path. If it were, you could just take some college courses and bingo bango, you'd find truth, you'd meet God, you'd know reality. And you could earn extra credit. And you could go to Fort Lauderdale for spring break. But it doesn't work like that. So the student position has a built-in limitation that doesn't really matter until something in the one who approaches the spiritual as a student starts to feel something, starts to experience something, starts to recognize that, well, I've learned all these things, but I don't have what I want. I haven't transcended anything. I haven't experienced any profound metamorphosis. I haven't become what I imagine I'm supposed to become. And that person starts to be only at that point aware of the limitation of the student role. I'm all for students. Most people start as students. Some start as disciples, but most start as students. Some start as bhaktas, but most start as students. They have the idea, and we all had this idea at some point, and usually for a long time, that if I read enough books, if I study the right things, if I listen to the right people, my job is to gather enough information that I can put things together and understand what I don't yet understand. And by doing that, I'll advance. And that's true up until you reach the end point of student possibility. At a certain point, it's diminishing returns. You've learned enough that you can certainly learn more, but to proceed and try to learn more, you start to feel like you're not getting any more because you're saturated. You've learned enough. It's adequate. It's sufficient. And then it starts to feel like it's diminishing. The more you seek, the more you study, the more you listen, the more you read, the more you approach spirituality from a student position, you realize that that's not going to satisfy, that's not going to get the job done. And that's when the person who's operated as a student of spirituality starts to have a sense that, wait a minute, something else either is called for or is possible. And that's when it gets usually more urgent. Now, the sad thing is when people stay in that mode, that bridge mode, they're wanting to go further than a student, they're wanting to find what comes after student or what's superior to student. because they realize they can't go much further as a student. They can work real hard, learn a lot, but they'll only move 1 more inch at the most instead of miles like they're trying to go. It's sad because you meet people who get to that juncture and for whatever reason just stay there. They can't find their way to make the leap to the next stage, the next position. Whenever I meet somebody like that, my heart goes out to them. It makes me sad because they're missing the true opportunity. They've actually worked to get the opportunity. They've gotten the opportunity. They're at that juncture. They're at the end point of student possibility, and now something much deeper is possible, but they somehow can't bridge it, can't get to it. Typically, they tend to be, people who get stuck there tend to be very intellectualized, very intellectual in their approach to life, and still are operating from the basic idea that everything has to be figured out and that the mental approach is always the best approach toward anything and everything. They haven't really found their way beyond or to anything else other than the mental level. It doesn't have to be like that, but typically that's the majority of people who get stuck the way I'm describing. You can be stuck for other reasons without being too intellectual about it, but that's the majority. So it has to be recognized that beyond student, the next level is something that if it's not actual discipleship with an actual one who has the power to initiate, the power to give the opportunity for discipleship, it has to at least be something that has the similar inner workings to discipleship, something that mirrors discipleship. And there isn't much that does. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but I'm pretty sure there is something, because there are people who have gone the whole distance without actually identifying a discipleship kind of position for themselves. So it's possible to do it, I'm sure, but I'm also just as sure that it's very rare. The wide road, the road that works, the way that is given, the way that is God created for moving further, generally is discipleship. And discipleship becomes a profound opportunity because you don't know what it means. Nobody who enters into discipleship has any clue, no matter how much their heart is already in it, no matter how much they already understand or have witnessed so that they have some sense. No one has any clue of what it's going to be. Because if you haven't ever been immersed in water, if you've never jumped in the ocean, you can't know what that experience is like to be all wet. If you've never stood under a shower, never been in the rain, and never jumped in the water, there's no way to know. It can be described, you can study it, you can hear about other people's experiences of being all wet, of being submerged, of being in the ocean, of being underwater, but you have no direct experience, and the only way to know what it is by direct experience. So being in the student role is trying to learn something, to know something about something. But discipleship is a direct experience. It's jumping in. It isn't about something, it's allowing something to happen. Being available to experience on the level of experience, meaning you don't know what it's going to mean, you don't know what it's going to bring, you don't know what the experience will be like, but you have some sense, some faith, some trust, some idea that there will be something you'll discover that you don't know anything about now, that it's ahead if you take this next step. And you don't take it for those reasons, you take it because you feel you have to. Your heart demands it. Your inner self says, this is absolutely something I must do, even though your mind says you've apparently lost your mind to do something this crazy, has become someone's disciple, to do something this radical and this unintelligible and this frowned upon in general by the world. I must have gone off the deep end. You, a little bit at least, try to talk yourself out of it if you're a normal person, but you find that you can't. For those it's really for, you find that it's a losing battle. Your heart keeps saying, I don't care what you think and I don't care what anybody else says. This has to be done. The same way as somebody their whole life has had a burning desire. They've never traveled and they've had a burning desire to see Japan. And they don't have much money and they don't have a lot of resources to take a big trip like to go from here to Japan, but they are just hell-bent. I'm going to get to Japan. I'm going to see Japan with my own eyes. It's not enough to see movies about Japan and see picture books that show Japan and read about it. I need to experience Japan. So it's the living experience. It's understood, even if you can't articulate it, that something in you recognizes that it's the deeper experience that has to be garnered, not just reading about it, not just hearing about it, not just seeing other people do it. That it doesn't work. You can't go further than you've come at that point as a spectator. Now you got to participate. Now you got to jump in. Now you got to be on the playing field instead of in the bleachers. And the discovery down the road somewhere, whether soon or whether way, way later, becomes something about the nature of transcending, something about the nature of transcendence itself, something about the nature and the reality of that which is the transcendent, which is the divine, which is the ultimate. And that becomes the first stage. If you enter that way as student, the second stage is disciple, the third stage is to start in an organic, experiential, alive way to experience the transcendent directly. And there are stages beyond that, but I don't want to get real complicated. So I want to give you a very, very simple map and a very simple, easily comprehended understanding of the most difficult and meaningful journey any human being ever takes. So it can be understood this way, in the following way. Everybody starts at doubt. What do you get in life? Whatever else you get the ability to doubt. You get the position, you get schooled in the position that it's good to doubt, that many things aren't for sure, that many things have to be approached with caution. And it seems to be the natural position, feels to people because of that conditioning, like doubt is simply the natural position of life. You don't have all the answers, you don't know everything about everything, at least you think you don't. You actually do, but that's not available to you yet. So the first stage of the journey is doubt. And that's everyone who's born. No one starts in the doubt-free position. It's just not the way it works. So whether you're worldly and could care less about anything called spiritual, or whether spiritual life is the most burning, important thing for you more than anything, both in the same position. Doubt is what is going on. The position you're in is the position of doubt. The conventionally minded person, the person who is caught in the web of the world and can't see beyond it and hasn't been touched by the beyond, has only two choices when it comes to doubt. Most take the first choice, which is to always go back to doubt in various situations in life. Never really being sure about anything. To the degree that you allow yourself to be aware of that, to be conscious of that, you may feel a lot of doubt going on in life, or not much, because some people just don't want to pay attention to that, and some people are very aware of that, and everything in between. So the conventional approach is doubt-based. And for the spiritual seeker, it's the same. So the next step, you could even say it this way, that the guru's job is to take you out of doubt, to move you from the doubt position to the next position. The next position is decisiveness, decision. Being willing to decide despite whatever doubts are going on, despite any feeling of doubt or sense of doubt, despite any experience of so-called confusion, no matter what the nature of the doubt that the person experiences, or no matter how much doubt is a factor in both everyday life and or spiritual life, those who seek out a guru or find a guru or approach one who is in the role of guru, what's going on the most elemental level is the guru is trying to move that person, or is trying to create the opportunity for that person to choose to go from the position of doubt to the position of decision, decisiveness. To, if doubt is there, still be willing to decide rather than waver endlessly, to kind of put your chips down, put your cards down, and it falls where it falls. And for those who are continuing to move forward, to actually start to experience a greater decisiveness, to not so much be caught in the continuous web of doubt. So if you think about yourself, if you think about your whole life, if you think about where you started, where you've been most of the time, if you think about most of the people you know, if you think about your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, your friends, your co-workers, your even fellow disciples, it's not hard to recognize that doubt is a major, major theme, a major activity, mind activity going on in everyone's life, until you enter the phase of decision-making and decisiveness. To do that, you have to rely on some kind of outside agency, because the only option otherwise is to fool yourself. The other option for the conventional person who doesn't like to notice all the doubt in their life is to become very, very pseudo-decisive, to be sure about their opinions, to feel that they're right and the other person is wrong. So the conventional person, I didn't finish the thought before, the conventional person has two options: to live in that doubt or to move into a position of self-deception where they don't experience the doubt even though it's fully going on, where they make it unconscious and they perceive themselves and experience themselves as both decisive and knowledgeable, so that I know the answer. This is the position of very, very religious people who are plugged into organized religion but not really conversant with spirituality. They haven't had a beyond experience. They haven't felt something transcendent. They haven't moved in their heart, but the idea of sureness, decisiveness appeals to them, and religion, most organized religions offer that through ritual, through dogma, through codes of conduct, through tenets of how to live. It's appealing to many people. It's not hard to understand. If you are in a stage of life that can last all of a lifetime, where doubt is behind everything, it's not hard to see how appealing it can be when something is offered through some organization or some body of understanding that says, no doubt is needed, here are the answers. Just follow this code and you'll be fine. So that's a pseudo, a fake decisiveness, a fake knowing, because it doesn't involve anything real from inside the person. It's something taken on from the outside. So it will never satisfy completely because it will never address the underlying doubt. And this is why people are easily converted. Very, very committed religionists, people who are very committed to religion but don't have anything of spirit going on, are actually quite prone to being converted to a different religion. Just give them a stronger argument. Give them a more airtight system that has more, seems like it has more direct and cogent answers more, explains more, and they'll switch. They used to be ardent Christians and now they're devout Muslims. They stumbled on Islam and realized, oh, this is more the truth. But all they're doing is trying to assuage their doubt, trying to address the doubt that is now unconscious so that they don't have to twist in the wind, so they don't have to feel like they're at sea without a paddle, that they don't have to be anxious and unsure and feeling of floundering. So the guru-disciple phenomenon is to move the person from doubt to decision, doubt to decisiveness. And as the disciple lives their discipleship, discovers what they discover as time passes, and they start to, from the inside out, from the interior, recognize more how discipleship works, because it's not a code of conduct, it's an inner position. And it changes you, and it has its own laws that it operates by and its own organic reality. And as the person becomes more aware of that, more sensitive to that, more unable to say it isn't so, more having to accept the truth of that because they see it with their own eyes, they feel it with their own heart, they know it in their own soul, then the decisiveness starts to be real. Then they are starting to disidentify and unhook from the doubt position and are moving more and more, and this usually takes some time, are moving more and more towards the decisive position rather than hang out in the doubt, which isn't necessary. They start to realize it isn't necessary. And out of trust, out of faith, out of devotion, out of increasing willingness to actually live their two things: live their discipleship, be in touch with what it is on the inside, and at the same time on the outside, to relate more for real with the Guru. Eventually, the end point of that stage is a real and abiding decisiveness. Finally, there's the insight. Finally, there's the understanding that the doubt is completely operating as an add-on. I can simply chuck it. I can simply not go there. I can simply choose to be following my own light rather than tell myself I don't know, or I can't figure it out, or I don't have the answer. Therefore, I must be in doubt. You cannot have the answer. You can not be able to figure it out. You cannot know. And none of that requires that you be hanging out in doubt. It's hard to get, this part. Doubt is not required. You don't need to be sure of yourself to not be in doubt. You can simply be not sure of yourself, yet not doubting. Because doubt is its own animal. Doubt is an actual force. Doubt is a real thing. Doubt is a position. Doubt is an activity. It has consequences. It yields results. It gives you certain feelings. It gives you a certain direction of thoughts. When you're in doubt, you think a certain way, you feel a certain way, whatever it is for you, but as a general pattern for most people that's similar. You respond to things indecisively. You don't feel like you have much intuition. You don't feel like you can trust yourself to just know what's best for you. You kind of embrace the doubt without realizing you're doing that. So the Guru is moving people from the doubt position to the decisive position. It's really a 4-step journey. This is one way to understand the entire spiritual path. So the second stage is the decisive stage. That is a relatively advanced disciple. Whether it takes 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years, or 5 decades, and everybody chooses a time frame, and everybody, there's people that represent every single one of those. The time frame is your choice, but at some point the decisiveness becomes solid enough. You trust your own ability to discover. You trust your own ability to not be victimized by your own ego enough that you really will leave behind the doubt habit. You see its non-necessity. You see that that was an indulgence. Not my fault that I was indulging in it, because the whole world indulges in it. I was taught that that's a good thing. Doubt's a way to approach something, figure it out, and decide what's right, or what's best, or what works. And that kind of doubt is fine. Healthy skepticism or intelligent figuring out is fine. But that's not the doubt I'm talking about. I'm talking about the general tendency we all start with as human beings, and that we learn from our environment and from who influences us and from the society in general. We learn that the doubt position is what's available to us, and we accept that because that happens early in life. We're too young to say, no, that's not a good idea. The question is how long we hang out in that, whether we get out of that at 20 or at 50 or at 90. So the guru-disciple situation is the most effective phenomena, most effective arena for people to be able, if you're called to discipleship, for people to be able to move from the doubt position to the decisive position. And once you're well down the road, once you really have gotten to the point where doubt is for real left behind, then you are eligible for what comes next. So the transitional stage is discipleship. So the first stage is doubt. The second stage is decisiveness. And the third stage is discipleship. So the Guru is moving people from doubt to decision to discipleship. Not required that anybody enter into discipleship. If your heart says so, if your soul says so, then yes, that's for you. If your heart doesn't say so, then you'll either continue as a student or you'll find something else. The Guru isn't trying to make that happen. The Guru isn't trying to force anybody in that direction. The Guru is simply, as a function, the reality of Guru makes that trip available to people. The Guru is simply trying to, from their side, cooperate with that movement to make it easy for people, to make it conducive. So the journey is from doubt to decision to discipleship. Initiation, asking for discipleship, obviously, you can see, is one of the first major decisive moments because it's a crisis. Am I going to do this or not? Am I going to ask for discipleship or am I going to run for the hills like any intelligent person would do? Because nobody sees it as a rational or reasonable thing to do to ask to be someone's disciple. Nobody's that crazy. So the majority of people weren't looking for a guru or weren't looking for discipleship. Some few individuals who read about it, heard about it, or something in them is wanting that for whatever reason. But the majority of us didn't go looking for it. It crashed into our life. Somehow it came around. So the first big decision is, do I or don't I? And you certainly, most of you have certainly heard me tell it, I don't know how many times over these last 11 years that I spent 2 years trying to fight it, trying to deny it, trying to get out of it. The decision was, this ain't for me, this is too crazy. How can I be someone's disciple? And luckily I couldn't fight my way out of it and had to give in. So that, and everybody who becomes a disciple, everybody who requests initiation goes through that struggle. There isn't one person where it doesn't happen. Some people seem to move decisively and they don't seem to struggle. That's because their struggle took 10 seconds. Some people are like me, the struggle took 2 years. Some people struggle for 10 years, 20 years. On average, people struggle a few months. That's what I notice. The average person, a few months, and then you kind of give up and realize, I don't have a choice, I have to do this. Come what may, I've got to bite the bullet and do it. And of course, then there's a scenario I was talking about before, or alluding to before, where people succeed in running away, succeed in deciding to not go where their heart and soul wants them to go. And then they live with a kind of smoldering regret the rest of their lives. They feel like a great opportunity was once there and now it's lost, now it's gone. Rarely, 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 very rarely, almost never, that's how rare, do they come back to the table. Once they've made a firm decision to escape, and they've escaped successfully, they've decided no on what their heart demanded, on what spirit required, on what God had planned, they almost never come back to the table. It's too painful. It's too much calls everything into question. Once in a blue moon, very rare, someone makes their way back and jumps in. takes discipleship who said no to it years before, but almost never. Most who escape find themselves exiled permanently, not because anybody's exiling them or you only get one chance, but just because of how it tends to work for the ego, for the human mind, for how people operate. They just can't find their way back. They're in the sad position of living in kind of a low-grade disappointment. Even if life is good, even if they're happy, even if they have many successes, there's a sense of something has been missed that didn't have to be missed. And they tend to be kind of low-grade depressed about it. And very often I've sat down with people who are in that position who talk about it they're very aware of it. They talk about opportunity lost, and they talk about something missing, and they talk about that was really the only big mistake I ever made. But somehow they can't stand up and go back. Somehow they just stay stuck there. You don't have to worry about that. Because if you got this far that you're listening to me from any position, that's not really going to be you. So the whole journey, really, I mean, this is how simple it is. The whole journey is that from doubt to decisiveness to discipleship. Obviously, the decisiveness and discipleship part can be contiguous, can be kind of both going on at the same time. And then the fourth stage, which is the more profound discovery within discipleship, which either leads to moving to the next and end stage of discipleship, devotee, which is a finished disciple. The same way a flower blooms, a totally bloomed disciple, one who has surrendered completely, found the way somehow, and it's always through grace, but you have to do your part, whatever it takes to get there, so grace can do it. To actually be in a position where it's legitimate to say that you've surrendered yourself to your guru. But even without that, even as a committed disciple, as one who is living their discipleship for real, it's still possible to go very, very far. And the fourth stage, like I said at the beginning, has more to do with actual transcendence, actually entering into the ultimate, to the unknown, to the mystery of the divine, the mystery of life, the mystery of existence, actually entering into it in an experiential way, actually walking in, not standing at the door and peeking in what's in there, not standing at the edge of the jungle and listening to all the foreign sounds and strange birds and wondering what it's like in the thick of it, actually going in. So people think when they take discipleship that they've entered, but the actuality of it is they haven't usually entered yet. Initiation is seen as an entry, and it's certainly an entry into something, but it's actually the entry into the entryway. And it's perfectly possible to hang out in the entry to the entryway for a long, long time, even forever. But once you've entered into the mystery of discipleship, the God-given method for going into the transcendent itself, if you reach the further inner shore of your own disciple experience, with or without moving to the final stage of devotee, you start to become aware, you start to experience the actual transcendent, that which is more directly and more purely spirit itself. You start to have a sensitivity and an awareness for what can't be named, can't be described, can't be spoken about, but can be experienced. And you always have the feeling that it's a partial experience, that you're not getting the whole ball of wax, you're not getting the whole thing, but you're getting some part of it that is real enough, so much that it feels to you as, I have never been anywhere more profound so far than this. It's like going far out into space. You get beyond Pluto, you get beyond the planets of this solar system, and you just keep going, and you don't know where the rocket is headed, but you know it's further and further out, or in this case, deeper and deeper in. And that's the same trip. So you find yourself in the odd position, if you're lucky enough to get that far, you find yourself in the odd position of being taken by surrender. If you haven't fully surrendered yet, which is not required to go where I'm talking about, enough surrender, adequate, is required, but not the whole enchilada. Then in that more transcendent position, in that more divinely oriented direction, you begin to have a sense fairly clearly of how surrender is coming towards you, how you are not going to be able to keep it in your hands, have the decision on your side. What happens with that? You start to get a much more clear sense that surrender is coming toward you, not what you've always thought, that you have to move toward surrender. You start to realize that in this position of being more directly in contact with the transcendent itself, the divine itself, that which is truth for real, that it actually is alive, that it actually seeks you. You've always thought of yourself as the one who's seeking. You always thought of yourself as a seeker. And it never occurred to you, if you were seeking God, if you were seeking truth, if you were seeking self-realization, it never occurred to you, and it can't. But then you start to get it, that maybe God, maybe truth, maybe self-realization is actually seeking me. And at that point, your ego doesn't stand much of a chance anymore. That's the precursor position to the ego falling. If you keep moving from that position, it's a matter of due course that the ego will simply expire. The trouble is, you have every freedom to not keep moving. You can actually short circuit that experiential and actual process and kind of take up residence right at that point, right in that position, and not go forward, so that the surrender or the divinity, let's say, that you feel might be, or is, if you're more sensitive, some people are clear enough, they say, it is moving toward me. You can actually, that's how free you are, you can actually plant yourself right there so that that movement stops, so that it's no longer moving toward you because you're not moving. The requirement for God to move toward you is that you be moving toward God. If you stand still, if God is coming at you in lightning speed, if the only thing truth wants is to get to you, if you stop, it stops. It moves based on your movement. It tries to reach you based on your degree of wanting to reach it. So you can want it with all your heart. You can live for it, but in a funny way, you can still stop or refuse or be too scared, or whatever the reason is. You can stop the movement because you're free to move and you're free to not move. You can stop going forward toward it. And the problem with that is that will make it stop. It is completely keyed in to you. It's keyed into your movement. And movement is the right word. You must be moving for anything to happen, because the nature of the material level that you're partly operating from is movement itself. And if you don't move inside you, it's kind of like you've turned off the conveyor belt or pushed stop on the elevator. It's just not going to do all the work for you. God isn't going to come seek you out in that position, if you're in that position. And all along the way, in all these 4 stages, that's the possibility that we all have, and we all do it to some degree at some point in every stage. We don't move in a straight line, and we don't move smoothly, and we don't march ahead confidently. We go in fits and starts, we zigzag, we go 5 steps forward and then run 6 steps back because it gets scary, it gets intense. And all of that's fine, because we all do it, more or less. Some more, some less, and me more. I know how I did that trip, but I definitely zigged and zagged like crazy. And you should be, I'm recommending you be acutely aware that your movement is the key. Your willingness to go forward, your resolve to not live your life within the confines of one or more of those stages, to keep moving through the stages. And I've mapped them out in this talk in the simplest way that I know how. You can't get more simple than four steps, 4 phases. Less than that, and you can't even describe it. You can't describe any trip in less than 4. You can't describe a trip to the mall without at least 4 separate activities or separate stages. First, you decide to go. Then you get in a car. Then you drive to the mall. Then you park your car. Then you go inside. There's 5 right there. Try to do it in less, you can't do it. So 4 is the minimum. So I can't get any simpler, but that's pretty simple. 4 stages to God. 4 phases to truth. 4 stations to self-realization, to how to enter the unknown for real, because the unknown is where you're going. If you're going to God, if you're seeking truth, if you want self, if you want to know source, another way to say all those same things is you are trying to enter the unknown, because you're already familiar with the known, or what you perceive as the known, or what you perceive it that way because you've been taught this is the known. Here's a table, up there's the sky. These things are called 4 walls, it's a house. These things are called your hands, these things are called your feet. This direction is up, this direction is down. That way's left, this way's right. That's the known. Whatever you've been taught is the name of things, the definition of things, and the meaning of things. And most of it you were taught before you were 3. That's called the known. You're also taught to believe in the known and trust in the known and be wary of anything that seems like it isn't known or can't be known or isn't known yet. So just understand very, very clearly and very, very simply that the spiritual path is the path not just toward the unknown, because that's not going very far. That's the student is moving toward the unknown without realizing that that's where they're moving toward. They think they're moving toward knowing more and having better information and having effective formulas, but that has nothing to do with the unknown. That's just trying to grapple in a more successful way with the known, or what one believes is the known. So however else you've ever thought of it, and whatever way you hold it, and whatever it means to you, understand that the spiritual path is the road to the unknown. And the unknown scares everybody. I don't care who you are, it doesn't matter how courageous you are, it doesn't matter how confident you are. The unknown unnerves everyone. Some are more conscious of it, some less. But this is the explanation for why at certain points along the way, all along the way, there's moments, and sometimes much longer than moments, of fear, of trembling, of overwhelming intensity, of tremendous feeling of disorientation and confusion, of feeling like you're unmoored and you don't know which way the boat's going to drift. Feeling adrift, feeling like I don't know which way is up, I don't know which way is down. And of course, all of that or any part of that feels dangerous. And how can you even use the word the unknown itself, without that implication that it feels dangerous? It feels dangerous to walk straight into a jungle that you've never been to before and you don't know what's in there. Could be lions, could be tigers, could be baboons, could be plants that eat you, who knows? So the unknown tends to feel to us human beings like a dangerous jungle. We could get caught in the thickets. We can slice up our feet without the right footwear. We could run across barriers. We could get to a point in the jungle where there's a river and there's no way to get across. It's too deep. You can't swim far enough to make it across. The current's too strong. You'll be drowned. If you try to ford the river, you'll be drowned. And that becomes an experience of spiritual crisis. When it's extreme, when it's profound, and the fear is the maximum possible, that's often referred to as the dark night of the soul. When you feel like it may be true that at this point, at this moment, all is lost. I may lose my mind, or I may just drop dead from how overwhelming and arduous and difficult and absolutely terrifying this is. Those moments will come if you persist. Just like every voyage of discovery where you're going into uncharted and unknown territory, there'll be moments of intense fear, of terror, of wondering if you've done the right thing. When they first started launching human beings, astronauts, into space, I am absolutely sure, never met an astronaut, never talked to one, but I'm absolutely sure that this is their experience, that the first guys who got in a rocket ship and they were going to the moon must have, at some point along the way, and certainly by the time they got close to the moon, if not before, must have had intense moments of absolute panic and absolute terror, just like we have on the spiritual trip to the moon. When you are on the spiritual path, you are taking, it's not so much like you're walking a road, it's more like you're on a trip to the moon. Much more that sense, much more that flavor, much more that that's the nature of it. You're actually much more a space traveler than you are a walker. The term spiritual path can kind of give a inaccurate picture because we think of walking down a path. And that's a far cry from hurtling through space. So the best inoculation is to know that those moments, even if it only lasts, and for some people, which I find amazing, it's really 5 seconds. For most of us, it's a little more harrowing than that when we get to those moments. But there are people who it doesn't last long. They kind of are so resolved and they're so resilient and they're so strong in their faith and their trust in the divine that for them the terror is bearable and they just move through. I'm not one of those. Probably you're not one of those, but they exist. It's possible. So from day one of me sitting in this chair, I've always spoken about this, that you should accept, if you're serious and sincere about your spiritual life, about your spiritual endeavor, if you really want God, if you really want truth, if you really want to know who and what you are, if you want to be actually self-realized, if you want to actually know the divine in more than a theoretical way, then these moments are unavoidable. There will be terrifying junctures. There will be moments of harrowing emotion, tremendous anxiety, panic, fear, terror. Basically that. Any or all of those. The good news, and I've said it many times, is that that never lasts a long time. By a long time, I mean it would be highly unusual if it lasted more than a few days. Very rare. It can, and there's cases where it has, but very rare. For most people, hours at the most. And for a lot of people, less than an hour. So the trick, when those moments come, is to have that understanding so firmly established in the back of your mind that you can call upon it when the going gets rough, when you get really scared, when some experience is going on and you feel like you are really in the unknown and you don't know what to make of it, and your heart is pounding, and your mind is confused, and your skin is sweating, and you feel like I could lose my mind or I could die right now, not tomorrow, not an hour from now, right now. The only real antidote from inside yourself, there are two antidotes. The only real antidote from inside yourself is that information of how this works. To be pre-inoculated that, guess what? This works the same for everybody. Here's the major points. It doesn't last long. Minutes, hours, at the most days for most people. Very rare to be more than a few days. If you're really in a dark night of the soul, you won't be 3 days from now. You can pretty much count on it. Not guaranteed. It's possible. It could be longer, but statistically, your chances are 99% that 3 days from now it'll be over. You'll be feeling normal. If you can remember that, and if you can remember, and you have to say this to yourself in your mind, you have to recall it, that this is not dangerous. It only feels dangerous. I'm not going to die. It only feels like this could kill me. I'm not going to lose my mind. It only feels like it could drive me crazy. The terror is real, but I'm not really facing a danger. There's not a real tiger facing me with snarling mouth, and that's why I feel it's so dangerous. I just feel the danger, but there's nothing out there that's gonna hurt me. If you can simply remind yourself and believe it, that's the best antidote I know of, and it's the best antidote there is. The second one, of course, available only to disciples, is you have faith in the Guru. You trust the Guru. You know that the Guru would not be interested in taking you to somewhere where there's actual danger, where you could be harmed, where you could be hurt, where you could die or lose your mind. You recognize that the relationship of guru-disciple has a protective aspect, and you call upon your own view of the Guru. You remember the Guru in that moment, and you take it for the reality that it actually is, that if you enter into a moment like that, the Guru is holding your hand. The Guru is with you in that moment. Part of the nature of Guru-disciple is the Guru is present when those moments arrive. So you're not in it alone. You're in it with somebody who not only has been through it, but knows how it works. Knows for real and for sure that there's no actual danger, even though it feels more dangerous than anything you've ever felt. You could have been facing an army, all with bazookas aimed at your head and ready to shoot, and it will not feel any more threatening than those moments. They're really, really intense, overwhelming. You will be absolutely overwhelmed, but if you're a disciple and you can remind yourself that I am not facing this by myself, I have legitimate assistance and competent assistance. I've been told that this isn't dangerous, even though it will feel as dangerous as it can be. That can make all the difference, because what you don't want is to succumb to it. In other words, to let the fear and the overwhelm cause you to pull yourself out of that moment and back to a feeling of safety. And basically, you turn around and run. You don't want to run, because those are the moments of the biggest possible spiritual opportunity, because those are the moments where you can actually break through to what's more real, to what's the actual divine, to what's the truth itself, so that your awareness can include what's bigger. Those are the grand opportunities. Now, it makes kind of logical sense that the grandest opportunities, the ones that can deliver the biggest payoff, would be the scariest, would be the most overwhelming, would feel the most intense, would be the most disorienting. I'm sure that when those first astronauts, when the lunar pod was going down from the mothership and about to land on the surface of the moon, I'm no doubt in my mind that every cell in their body was at maximum feeling of intensity and danger, and as if this vehicle is going to set down on the unknown itself. Who the hell knows what's going to happen to me once it reaches the surface of the moon? For all I know, the whole thing will blow up. The whole capsule, or whatever it is, will blow up. Those thoughts have to be there. That's the way the mind works. Those fears have to get generated in us, because that's how we operate. That's what happens in these supreme moments of the unknown being contacted, being actually entered into. So the journey is from doubt, which is basically the position of, I don't want to futz around with the unknown. Sounds dangerous to me. I'm not going there. To decisiveness, I've decided it's worth the trip of discovery. It's worth chancing it. To discipleship, this seems to be the most effective vehicle, and even though it kind of doesn't make sense from 1,000 other angles, I'm going to get on board and see what happens. And then to transcendence, I'm going to walk into the entryway to the unknown. I'm going to step in and I'm going to keep going. And wherever it takes me and whatever the experience is and whatever it means, I'll find out. Maybe it'll be terrible, maybe it'll be wonderful. I've heard that it's worth it, but I'll find out for myself. This willingness to accept the fact that it can only be done by you and known by you, that someone else's experience of the divine isn't going to be sufficient. You have to have your own experience, just the same way as no one, when you're starving, can't eat the food for you. You've got to take the food, put it in your mouth, chew it, get it into your system. Your digestive system takes it and you get nourished. Just like that, the spiritual journey works the same way. The spiritual experience works the same way. You have to digest it in your system. No one can be a surrogate for you. The guru is not a surrogate for your spiritual journey. simply an assistant to help you, simply the one who says it's safe to eat this meal. Don't worry. I've eaten it and look, I'm fine. So it's no more, and I advise that it's good to look at it as no more complicated than that. And you can always determine which stage am I in. Am I still so much in doubt that I can accept and recognize and tell myself the truth that I'm still in the doubt stage? Even advanced disciples can remain in the doubt stage. Have I moved into the decisiveness stage? Am I no longer hesitant about every little thing? Am I more clear that I'm on the God journey and it's my intention absolutely to arrive? Do I feel that different experience in life and in spiritual life of the doubt is not running the show anymore? And then am I living my discipleship in such a way that it continuously, as every day passes, as time goes forward, as my life moves forward, I find myself entering more deeply, more profoundly into this thing called discipleship. It continues to yield and show me and give me a more profound and ever new understanding, experiences, insight, but more than anything, I feel myself transformed. Not the same person I was before, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, an ever increasing and continuing sense of I continue to move deeper and deeper, further and further. I continue to grow in ways I couldn't have anticipated. I understand things today that I didn't even know needed to be understood 3 years ago. I've seen horizons that I didn't know were out there. And I know I'm continuing to move toward them. Always new surprises, always bigger vistas opening. That's the deepening of discipleship. And lastly, that the transcendent becomes available to you in a profoundly real and personal way like never before. It cannot be compared to any prior experience, any prior sense of the ultimate. That you have no doubt and it's clear to you. There's nothing to question, there's nothing to be doubtful about. That the transcendent, the ultimate God, truth, reality are available to me more than ever before. Whatever your word is, doesn't matter what the word is. Some call it God, some call it truth, some call it self-realization, some call it source. The word's irrelevant. It's all referring to the same thing. Some call it the mystery. That there's a clear knowing in you, not knowing like a thought or an idea, but knowing like in your guts, in your cells, in the depth of you, that you are more in touch and in tune with that than you ever even imagined or knew is possible, that you are standing in a very different position than you ever imagined, and that what is moving towards you and what you're moving toward is not categorizable under any past definition or past expectation, that this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is not what I intended. This is all new and surprising. It turns out that when I opened the book expecting to see writing, I opened the book and a tree popped out, full-grown tree, 20 feet high. Transcendent means the mystery of it is palpable. The mystery of it is now felt by you in a profound way. You know that it's about what you are in touch with, not what you do, but what you do with what you're in touch with determines how far you go. So that's the whole understanding tied with a bow. You don't need more than that. 4 phases, 4 stages, 4 legs of the journey. And you can always determine, ask yourself, be honest with yourself, where am I? Am I in the first, the second, the third, or the fourth? Most of us stay in the first way too long. If we're lucky enough and persistent enough to get to the second, it's possible to just hang out there for the rest of your life. That's not recommended. If discipleship is what's in store for you, then how am I living it? Where is it taking me? What is it? Am I really entering in as deeply as is required so that I'm actually moving further and further and further, not just, oh, I'm a lot happier than I've been, I'm a lot more successful in life than I've been. Sounds like great results to me. What else do I need? You've got to keep moving. And in the fourth, am I willing to enter in such a real way, in such a whole person way, that the transcendent itself becomes very normal, very comfortable for me. I'm no longer fearing it the way I was, even when moments of anxiety or disorientation or even terror arrive. I still feel safe. I know that this will not have a bad result. I know that that's a emotional transition, psychological and emotional experience that represents the transition to something yet more profound, yet higher. So that higher consciousness becomes something you're familiar with, not something you dream about. So that you see the reality of it in yourself, in your life, and in your own comprehension, in your own awareness. So that you get to the point where you never for a split second feel separate from the divine itself, separate from the transcendent source, separate from the mystery itself, separate or somehow cut off from what's actually real, which is the ground of being itself, which is the nature of existence itself, so that you actually start to understand that it isn't about getting answers, it's about how far can I go? And you don't really as much go there, even though it's movement, it's right to call it movement, you don't so much go there as more and more surrender your way into it, relax your way into it. Keep moving despite anything that happens or anything that seems to be there. You don't let anything work as a barrier to your intention to move forward. That becomes much easier in stage 3 and not hard at all in stage 4. Really hard in stage 1. Really hard. Seems impossible. So the trick for those of us who are in stage 1 is to not be needlessly pessimistic. Oh, I could never get there. He can do it, she can do it, but I'll never do it. That's useless. You don't know how far you can go. You won't know until you've gone a goodly way. And even then, you will not be able to say in any guaranteed way that I know how far this will take me. The amazing surprise of it is that guaranteed, if you persist, if you keep moving, guaranteed, it will always be much farther than you ever imagined. It's like, remember when you were a kid and you first went in the water and then different lakes and where there's rivers where they have a drop-off. The first time you experience a drop-off, you're walking, it's only waist level, and suddenly you're in over your head. You can't anticipate a drop, unless you know there's a drop-off, but you don't know. Let's say you've never been in that lake, so you don't know, nobody's told you there's a drop-off. It's a lot like the drop-off experience in the water. You thought you were going this way, and suddenly, whomp, you're way, way deeper. You're way, way more immersed. You're way, way more engulfed. But in the spiritual arena of things, that tends to be a profoundly, positively felt experience. You feel like something wonderful has happened. You feel like you've been catapulted to a much better position. It isn't the drop-off experience of, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this? It's the drop-off experience, say, as if you suddenly had gills, and you go, wow, this is a whole different world. I thought it was this. Turns out it's that. And as you're saying that to yourself, you realize, but I was pretty sure before, so why am I being so sure now? Who knows what is ahead? Who knows how much there is to see and experience and know and feel and be? And all that's happening is you're simply becoming more who you've always been. You're only becoming more that which you have always been, will always be, and can't be otherwise. You're no longer screening out the profound experience of what an alive human being is. There's no greater surprise possible. So cultivate the kind of attitude where you really, really like surprises. You really, really welcome surprises. I'm the type of personality, I don't like surprises. And you may be like that, or you may be the opposite. But whatever your personality is, aside from that, cultivate the joy of surprise. That to be surprised by the profound, to be surprised by the ultimate itself, the divine itself. How can that be other than a wonderful experience, a wonderful position? Only 4 steps, and there you are. Okay. I think that does me. I think that's fleshes out what I started last Wednesday. I didn't say a few loose odds and ends that I got to say tonight, so thank you for bearing with me. I'm going to end with a commercial and remind you again that we have a first ever ICODA event this coming Saturday, ICODA Theater Night, where we have a live 1-act play that's going to be performed right here by live actors. An original play that has come to us from Europe, and that is a play that has a lot of fun in it and a lot of profundity in it, and I can't imagine anybody coming to enjoy that 1 hour of theater who isn't going to be glad they did and have a good time. So please join us next Saturday, 8 o'clock.